everybody. Let's do this. Here we go!
Hello Musketeers, welcome to Mondays with Mickey. My name is Mike Knigge and I am your host, and this week we are going to step away from Disney a little bit and we are going to do a review on Star Trek Discovery. Now, I have to apologize up front. I know this episode's coming out late and it's not something I wanted to do, but I have been struggling with how I wanted to do this for several days now. I've come up with different plans of attack and different things I wanted to say. There's some subject matter in this that is not going to be super kid friendly, so I was debating on how I wanted to approach that, whether I wanted to put out some kind of disclaimer before I started or how I wanted to do that. So this has been kind of a back and forth thing for me, and unfortunately, like I said, I'd also decided to do this kind of late in the game, so rather than having a full week to kind of plan and decide, I only had like a day. So it's been a challenge. So I want to apologize for how late this is coming out. The reason I'm doing this episode is because, well, one, I am a longtime Star Trek fan. I've watched the first episode of Star Trek, and when I say the first episode, I mean the original pilot, The Cage. I watched that when I was maybe 5 years old. My dad showed it to me. So my first, and I'm in my 30s, so I didn't watch this when it came out on TV. I watched it while The Next Generation was out, as a matter of fact, I think. Or right as The Next Generation was getting ready to come out. So, my first experience with Star Trek was the original series, because my dad was a fan. So, I really enjoyed Star Trek overall, and so I was actually really looking forward to Star Trek Discovery. But the reason I'm doing this, now I'm off on a little tangent already. By the way, this is the third time I've attempted to record this. The first two, I just didn't like the way they turned out, and I reformatted what I was wanting to say, and this is attempt number 3, so hopefully third time's a charm. But the reason I'm doing this is because I saw a person put out a review of the pilot, the 2-episode pilot for Star Trek Discovery, and a lot of the things he had to say were so off base and so politically charged that, I felt I should respond. I should do respond to his perspectives, because if he has those perspectives, others do, and, give some honest feedback on the show. So we'll go ahead and throw this out there now. Like I said, this isn't going to be Disney related. It's going to be Star Trek related, and yes, I know some of you out there are probably going, why are we talking about Star Trek on a Disney show when Disney owns Star Wars? And aren't they rivals and so on and so forth? Yes, there are some fan rivalries with Star Trek and Star Wars. But let's face it, we've got people like J.J. Abrams and George Takei who've worked on both sides of the fence. The rivalry is fan-made. It has nothing to do with the actual creators of the show or the actors of the shows and things like that. They all respect each other. And they both stand tall in their own genres. So, again, the reason we're doing this is because, one, I'm a Star Trek fan, and two, I wanted to respond to that. So, with that said, this episode may or may not be super kid-friendly. So, if you want to cut it off now, we'll see you guys on our next episode. Thank you for listening. I'm going to give you a second to kind of duck out if you need to. All right, so if you're still here, then let's go ahead and get on to this thing. Let me give you a basic description of Star Trek Discovery, because I'm really trying not to give too many spoilers. But here's a basic rundown of how the show gets set up. Now, the first 2 episodes, the Discovery is not in it. Okay, the first 2 episodes are meant to set up the universe we're getting ready to experience and live in. Instead of it being solely centrally focused. Instead of it being focused on an ensemble cast where, everybody kind of gets their own time in each episode, this show is more or less focused on one character, one central character, and that character's relationships with everybody else around her. All right, the main character is played by, I apologize if I murder names here, Sonequa Martin Green. She plays a character named Michael Burnham. In the first episode, she's first officer of the Shenzhou, sorry. It's spelled Shenzhou, but pronounced Shenzhou. USS Shenzhou. Her captain is played by Michelle Yeoh. The character's name is Captain Philippa Giorgio. And in the first 2 episodes, it delves into their dynamic, where they come from, who they are. Also introduces the main antagonist for the series, the Klingons, who have undergone another makeup change for those who are fussing about it. It's just a makeup change, people. And if you really want to have an understanding as to why it's a makeup change, why the makeup change is so drastic, put it to you this way. This is coming before the original series. The original series, they look like humans with, brown paint and exaggerated eyebrows and goatees. So if you cross this with that, you get your next generation Klingons. Leave it at that. Because it was pointed out in Deep Space Nine when they went back in time and their crew members saw the original Klingons, said those aren't Klingons, and Worf was like, no, they are, but that's a time that we don't discuss. So what happened in that time they don't discuss could be an explanation why they went from the Klingons we're seeing right now to the Klingons we're seeing in the next generation. So there's my explanation for that. It's a little off. It's a little ahead of myself, but I want to throw that out there. So anyway, first episode, you're introduced to those two characters, and you're introduced to the new conflict dealing with the Klingons. By the end of the episode, the second episode, Michelle Yeoh's character, she was just a guest star, Captain Philippa Giorgio, is dead, and the Shenzhou is essentially a derelict hulk in space, and they've all abandoned it. Michael Burnham, Commander Michael Burnham, has now been stripped of rank and imprisoned. Again, I don't want to go into details why that happened, but watch the episode, you'll find out. So, by the third episode, which, by the way, the review I'm going to talk about that I'm responding to didn't get that far. By the third episode, she finds herself on the Discovery under Captain Gabriel Lorca, played by Jason Isaacs. Those who are fans of Jason Isaacs or, know him from things like Harry Potter, The Patriot. He's he always plays kind of a darker character, and this character is no exception to that rule. He's a man that is driven by, we'll do whatever we have to do to win the war, one way or another. So it's going to make him an interesting character in the series moving forward. But that's the basic description. Michael Burnham, which, people are complaining about her name. Let me go ahead and jump on that now. Yes, she has a traditionally it's a male name, Michael. But who cares, people? Come on now. This is supposed to be the future where we are moving beyond those conventional beliefs, and we're accepting people as they are. In today's culture, we have names that are so far out there for people, and we don't complain about those names as much as people are complaining about Michael. I know somebody whose first name is Fancy. Her name is Fancy. It's not what you would normally consider a name. But people don't freak out about that as much as they're freaking out about, Sonequa's character being called Michael. Honestly, after watching 5 episodes, Michael Burnham fits her. So, get over it. And let's for the Disney fans, let's throw this out there. Stitch. Stitch isn't a real name. They say it in the episode. Maybe in Iceland, they try to come up with something. So let's move on from the name. But yeah, that was one of the things that in the review I'm going to talk about. You know, they pointed that out. So I'll go ahead and throw that out there now. So anyway, Michael Burnham is on the Discovery, and she's kind of working towards redemption under Captain Lorca. Captain Lorca is commanding the Discovery, and Discovery is essentially a military science ship. They are coming up with ways to win the war, and you know, at whatever cost and whatever tools they can find at their disposal. So that's kind of the setup. I don't want to go into too many details because I really want you guys to watch the show. I think you'll appreciate it. I guess that throws it out there. Spoiler alert. I am a fan of the show. I think the show is very well written. I think it's beautiful as far as the way it's filmed and put together. And I'll get more into that later. So let me start on answering some of these accusations from that review that prompted me to do this. The gentleman in question said that it's filled with political rhetoric, that it is extremely liberal, and it's shoving liberal beliefs and dogma down the throats of conservatives. He commented on, you know, how most of Hollywood is liberal and most of the actors are liberal, and I mean, he was very, very hardcore about saying that, you know, they were trying to shove this down the throats. As far as I'm concerned, Star Trek hasn't changed in its core beliefs and its core ideas. It has not changed, and including this series, it has not changed. You know, their version of utopia is a world, as a universe where people live together in respect and accept each other as they are. Okay? That does not mean there's no conflict. What it means is that they understand that your culture is not necessarily my culture, or your interests, or your gender identification, or your sexual interests, or your color, or whatever might not be mine. They're yours, and I respect that it's yours, but it doesn't have to be mine. And again, that doesn't mean there's no conflict, but it means that they've gotten to a point now where it's not in the forefront of life. You know, there's no, you're judged more on the merits of what you do than where you come from, if that makes any sense. His perspective was that it was a utopian future where everybody's happy and it's all roses and happiness, and everybody has their place and they're happy where they are and not interacting with each other. That, my friend, is not utopia. That is segregation. Okay? Star Trek is not about saying, okay, you're over here, you're over here, you're over here. Oh, you like guys? You're over here. Oh, you think you're a guy, but you're really a girl? No, you're over here. Oh, hey, you're a different color. You're over here. No, that's not how... And everybody's happy in their little places. No, that's not how the utopian future that Star Trek has always presented works. That is segregation. Okay? The utopian future that Gene Roddenberry created is that there is a future for us. It is a bright future of cooperation and understanding. So, that answers that question. Another thing he threw out there was, oh, there's no white men. They apparently are anti-white men. They're forcing down the throat that, you know, it has to be a mixed gender. There's no white people on there, blah, blah, blah. That, my friend, is very racist. There are white men in Star Trek. Oh, yeah, he mentioned that the one white guy they showed in the series thus far was racist to the commander, to Michael Burnham. No, it's sexist to Michael Burnham. So let me throw this out there. First off, you only watched the first 2 episodes, and yes, the crew on the Shenzhou was very eclectic. Had a mixture of aliens, men, women. Yes, the captain and the first officer were female. Neither of them were white. So fucking what? The admiral that they spoke with was a white man, yes. And no, he was not being racist or sexist to Michael Burnham when he interacted with her. She interrupted his conversation with the captain and try to shove her views down his throat. And in a military in a military hierarchy, that's inappropriate. And he stomped on her for it. She jumped into something she had no business being in, and he stomped her for it. I would have expected that in any kind of military hierarchy. So, no. This person also only went through the first 2 episodes. In the 3rd episode, when you get to Discovery, you encounter a different crew and a different mixture of people, in which you do have some more men. You do have the captain, Captain Lorca. He is a white guy. You know, the chief scientist is a white guy. Turns out he's also a gay white man, which I'm sure whoever did this guy who did the review would probably have a problem with that too. But we'll get to that in a minute. So, you know, he was complaining about that. He said he said that they were forcing their views on the public and saying, look, you know, it's bad to be a white person, and that you need to be like one of these people if you're a good person. That's not the case. Okay, he was saying that it was unnecessary forced equality, and that's again not the case. Star Trek has always been tried to be not an innovator, I guess. Yeah, it's always attempted to be an innovator and showing that in this vision of the future, we will all work together as people, not just as one race or another, or one gender or another, or one belief structure or another. We all work together with mutual respect and understanding. Okay? The crew in question on the Shenzhou just so happened to be that the first officer and the captain were female, and that you had an eclectic group of aliens and such. So it's not that they're forcing this on us, it's just that's the way that one crew is. The crew on a different ship could be different. They're showing that there is diversity. And, you know, showing diversity is not shoving it down your throat. You know, this is something that we've encountered from the beginning of Star Trek, okay? You know, Gene Roddenberry introduced Nichelle Nichols as Uhura. So, and she's not only a black person, she's also a black female. She's a black officer on the bridge of a starship, alongside an Asian officer on the bridge of a starship, alongside, by the way, in the middle of the Cold War, a Russian officer on the bridge of a starship. So, you know, he was all about showing that we can all work together towards a common goal. All right? It didn't matter what sex or religion or whatever you are. We could all work together. And the show is picking up that mantle and continuing with that. It's not forcing something down your throat. This is the way Star Trek is. And if you don't like that, that's fine. Go away. You can go watch something else. So they're continuing with that mantle, you know. And of course, down the line, they had a black commanding officer on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which, I'm sorry, Avery Brooks did a fantastic job as Sisko. You know, we look at Kate Mulgrew playing Catherine Janeway, captain of the Voyager. You know, yes, this is stepping out of the stereotypical need to have a white male in command. But you know what? That's the point. Star Trek wants you to focus on the characters and see who they are as people and who they are in their roles, without, you know, paying attention and focusing on what their religion or gender or color or whatever is. They want you to see them who they are as people. And they build their stories based on these things. And they're not stereotypical about it. They don't focus on it. It just so happens that they are what they are. And if that's forcing views on people, okay, fine, I guess. But you know what? It's a positive view. And finding a way to make that negative is pretty pitiful. And it shows how shallow somebody can be. So Star Trek is about embracing differences and growing as people. And if you can't understand that, well, then maybe it's not the show for you. So let me go on. I think I've gotten through all his gripes. Oh, wait, no, there was one other gripe that he had, and I'm going to throw that in there now. He said that the Klingons represented National Socialists and Conservatives. saying that, the liberal media were trying to show how evil the National Socialists and the Conservatives are. First off, lumping the two groups together, which is not fair. Not fair to the Conservatives, but lumping them together, saying that they were basically being oppressed by the Liberal Federation, that the Federation was trying to step into their territory and force their beliefs on to the Klingons, just as they're forcing their beliefs onto us. First off, if you watch the episode, no, the Federation aren't expanding their borders into Klingon territory simply because they don't want a conflict with the Klingons. The Klingons actually were farting with the Federation territory to get the Federation's attention to start a war, to unite their houses. First off. Secondly, the Klingons are neither Nazis and they're not conservatives, okay? If anything, they're closer to the Huns or closer to the Persians. They are a warlike culture. And when I say Persians, let me clarify. We're talking the Persians of like Greek times. They are a warlike culture. They have always been a warlike culture, focused on honor, loyalty, family. They revere their ancestors. They're very, actually, I mean, they're almost like samurai in some ways. They're a very warlike and proud people. And they've always been this way from the start of the original series till now. Yes, their makeup's changed, but the core of who Klingons are has remained the same. And to go back today and say that they are like the Nazis is unfair. Honestly, you want to know what movie series, TV series, what group is fashioned after the Nazis? It's the Empire from Star Wars and the Stormtroopers. They are actually modeled after the Nazis. So there is a difference between what the Empire is in Star Wars and the Klingons. A big difference. And not only to compare the Klingons to Nazis, but also to lump all conservatives in with Nazis, that's an unfair thing to do. Because they're two different groups with two different belief structures. Yes, there are some out there that straddle that line. Just as there's some out there like myself who straddle the line between Republican and Democrat. For the record, I'm neither. I'm unaffiliated. I was raised Republican, but as I grew up, I developed my own opinions, some of which don't necessarily agree with the Republicans, some of them agree with the Democrats. So I'm kind of in the middle. I go with whoever makes the most sense to me. But I don't identify as either. So to lump, that's a tangent and I apologize, but to lump all Republicans and Republicans in general, I shouldn't say all, just Republicans in general, along with the National Socialists, to try to make a point saying that, oh, they're segregating us, it's ridiculous. And that's somebody who's just pulling at straws to try to demonize a group of people he doesn't like. Basically, he was exactly doing what he was accusing the writers and the actors of Star Trek Discovery of doing. He was doing to prove his point, which was kind of sad. So, no, the Klingons are not Nazis. They're not Republicans either. At best, they are Klingons, and they are what they are. So, moving on. Let's get on some actual gripes. All right, so, and then I'll talk some more about the positives after. But Star Trek Discovery was billed to be in the prime timeline. Now, when this first came out, the first I watched it, I got actually kind of angry. Because to me, it's not in the prime timeline. But after reflection, the show's supposed to take place 10 years before Kirk and Spock are on the Enterprise. Okay? Which, if you think in timelines, it could be in either the Kelvin or the prime. The Kelvin timeline was created at the birth of Kirk, when the USS Kelvin was destroyed by the Romulan ship that followed Spock back. That happened in Abrams' movies. And that timeline is its own thing. if they're saying that this is taking place in the Prime timeline, as if the Kelvin thing never happened, then okay, yeah, it works. But here's my thing. The show, one of the things I'm very happy about with the show, actually, is aesthetically designed like the Kelvin timeline. Now, granted, if you watch the original Star Trek movie that Abrams put out, it opens essentially with the USS Kelvin being destroyed. And the look of the Kelvin at the time was very much along the lines of the look of Star Trek Discovery. So you could argue that before the Kelvin was destroyed and the Kelvin timeline was started, this look was already in place. But for Star Trek enthusiasts and nerds like myself, who look at continuity issues, and Star Trek is bad about that, we'll get to that next. The original Star Trek series looks nothing like Discovery. Okay. The ships aren't painted white. The design look of the ships are nothing like the original series. The design of the ships, the interiors, the uniforms, all are very reminiscent of Abrams' movies. So it looks like it's Kelvin timeline. Now, granted, had the original series been made today, I'm sure the original series would look like this right now. Look just like Discovery, with the same aesthetic and the same style. They were current for their time in the 60s. And the show is current for its time here in the, 20-teens. So, it's one of those you have to take it with a grain of salt kind of situation. It is a gripe, because it's unclear as whether it really is Kelvin timeline or whether it is Prime. But if you put that to the side and just enjoy the series for what it is what it is. Now, the next gripe is going into what I just talked about, continuity. And this is not just a gripe for Discovery. This is really a gripe for Star Trek in general. Star Trek has always sucked at continuity. And what do I mean by continuity? By keeping all threads of the story tying into each other properly. For example, in The Next Generation, you have an episode called Relics, where Scotty from the original series is located in a transporter buffer on board the USS Jenolan, which had crash-landed on a giant space station called a Dyson Sphere. It has like a star in the middle. It's huge. They followed the distress call, found the ship, and when they were on board, they found there was power to the transporter and there was a pattern in the buffer, and they were able to resurrect Scotty, essentially. And, they told him they're from the Enterprise. They brought him on board the ship, and he starts commenting on, oh, they've changed all this, they've changed that, because he has no idea how much time has passed. He thinks he's only been there for days, maybe weeks. He's been in there for decades. So he's like, oh, you guys changed this, you changed that. He goes, I bet Jim Kirk himself pulled the old girl out of mothballs to come rescue me. That worked just fine for that episode. Until a few years later, when they made Star Trek Generations. And they were explaining how, they showed how Kirk and Picard come to meet each other. And for that to happen, Kirk was on board the Enterprise B with Chekhov and Scotty. And he goes down to try to save the ship. And in the process, the Nexus, this big energy ribbon, blasts a huge chunk out of the Enterprise B with Kirk in it. So Kirk is presumed dead. And Kirk is stuck in the Nexus all the way into the future when Picard pulls him out to help him with his mission. So, for all intents and purposes, Scotty believes he saw Kirk die. So why would Scotty, in the Next Generation time frame, before Kirk is resurrected from the Nexus, why would Scotty say, oh, Jim Kirk himself probably pulled the little girl out of mothballs to come get me? There is your problem, right there. It's a continuity issue. And Star Trek has had that happen several times throughout the series. This is not the only example of it. With Star Trek Discovery, we're dealing with a continuity issue right now, again, with that whole Kelvin timeline thing. It's not very clear. Another thing that we're dealing with, another continuity issue we're dealing with, is actually in episode 5. They were listing Starfleet's most decorated captains, whether dead or alive, and some of the captains they mentioned were Robert April, who was the original concept captain for Star Trek. He was later made into canon throughout the comics, but he was supposed to be the first Enterprise captain. And then they mentioned like Jonathan Archer. They mentioned Captain Georgiou. They mentioned Christopher Pike, and they mentioned Captain Decker. Not the Captain Decker from Star Trek the Motion Picture, but the Captain Decker who becomes Commodore Decker later in the future and dies by the Doomsday Machine. All really cool to hear these names because it kind of ties it in, but it does raise another continuity issue. And this continuity issue came from Enterprise specifically, because when Scott Bakula was pitched the role for Jonathan Archer, he said, "You're going to be the original captain." Well, that's not true. Robert April was supposed to be the original captain, not Jonathan Archer. So it raises the question, did Jonathan Archer come before Robert April? Was there an Enterprise before Archer's Enterprise? Or was there an Enterprise between Archer's Enterprise and Kirk's Enterprise, or Pike's Enterprise? Another strange question. So the way that it kind of listed almost in order of who was alive, or when the, in I don't say alphabetical or numerical order, but in order of when, time frame periods in which each captain was around. And Robert April was the first on the list. So it's one of those strange continuity issues, like where does this all fit in the timeline? It's really cool that they mention these characters because it does tie the series into the Star Trek lore. And I'm glad they did it. But it does raise a lot of questions still about the Enterprise and whatnot. Are we going to see the Enterprise? I don't believe Pike, unless Pike had a 10-year mission on the Enterprise before Kirk got it. They were doing 5-year missions. So I'm guessing Pike is probably not on the Enterprise yet. He's probably on another ship. Or if he is on the Enterprise, maybe he's not. Well, he has to be a captain because it listed him as captain. So what ship is Pike on? Is Robert April in command of the Enterprise right now until Captain Pike takes over? Who knows? Maybe we'll see in the series. But those are the kind of small gripes I have. And I said, the look, as much as I love the look of the show, it does scream Kelvin to me, which tells me that it's not really Prime. And that irks me a little, but not enough to dislike the show. And I apologize for that noise. I just dropped something here. So I apologize. But, so yeah, not enough to dislike the show, but definitely enough to make me go, So let's talk about some of the positives from the show. I think it's very well written. With the continuity errors, and this is how we'll tie that in. It's well written. And yes, Star Trek has continuity errors. And the reason Star Trek has continuity errors is its writing. So let me explain this. Star Trek traditionally has been very open to other writers being involved with their stories. Okay? So in the old days when Gene Roddenberry was running the show, Gene Sr., not Eugene, he would allow people to submit episodes to him. And if they liked the episode, they would film it and make it happen. The problem with that is that, okay, say I watch an episode tonight. Oh, that's great. That inspires me to write this episode. So I write this episode over the course of a week or so, or 2 weeks, or however long it takes to write the episode. And I submit the episode, and say the writers at Star Trek love the episode I wrote, and they go ahead and they produce it and put it out. Well, that could be months to years between when I originally wrote the episode and now. So if any other writers have episodes popping up, there's details in these episodes that don't necessarily match up. And so traditionally Star Trek, each episode was kind of wrapped in its own little bow. Very few episodes linked to previous episodes because they all had their own little story arcs and their own little things. Now, put together, there's an overall story arc that kind of comes to fruition. But each episode was kind of tight-knit in its own little bow. Each had its own little message, and it was they're pretty much standalone stories on their own. This, however, is different. And that's actually off-putting to some people, that this is different. This show is more of a build on itself kind of show. Very similar to a lot of shows these days, where, you know, at the end of this episode, the next episode essentially starts off right where this episode leaves off. So it's a longer, more developed story arc as opposed to a bunch of small story arcs just kind of linked together loosely. So I think it's very well written, and with the way they're doing it now, and they seem to have more set writers, some of which include Eugene Roddenberry, which is Gene's son. It's including Nick Meyer, who is pretty much single-handedly responsible for saving the Star Trek movie series at Star Trek II, and then later in subsequent movies. So they've got people who know Gene's vision and know what it's all about, spearheading the writing teams. So with it being a long story arc as opposed to, you know, small episodic type stories, we're getting deeper development of characters. And I know that made it very slow, particularly in the premiere, because it was setting the stage for this deeper storyline and these more developed arcs that are coming. If you watch all the way up to the current episode, you'll see that some of these arcs are starting to form, and it's getting interesting. So I love the writing. I love the fact that they're doing it that way, because it's different. It's still Star Trek, and it's still, you know, teaching lessons in these episodes as you go along, and forcing you to see some of these issues that we deal with in the day-to-day life, but in a context that is more accessible. It's still doing that, but doing it in a longer story arc as opposed to, you know, small 1 hour story arcs. There's still an arc to it, but, you know, it's not as defined. You know, again, these episodes are all linked together as opposed to individual episodes that are may reference something from a previous episode down the line, but rarely do. It's beautifully done. Like I was saying, you know, it's a curse and a blessing that they're going with more of a Kelvin timeline look, even if it is in the prime timeline. But technology has advanced so much, and it's so apparent in the look of the show. It's dazzling. It's beautiful. It's very well crafted as far as the effects are concerned. I'm really enjoying it. It's definitely got a faster pace as opposed to the traditional submarine combat, where you just kind of see the crew, oh, we're turning left, and then we all jerk left, or we're firing torpedoes, and it might show you shoot a torpedo. This is more of a live action, more of a flight simulator as opposed to submarine warfare, if that makes any sense. You know, it's one of the comparisons they always made with Star Trek and Star Wars, and why a lot of the younger fans like Star Wars so much is because it was more of a flight simulator type combat situation where you were seeing these things in real time, duking it out. Whereas with Star Trek, you had to use your imagination a little more. It was more submarine combat. It was more, they called space opera-like. You know, they're focused on the characters. They still focus on the characters now that they've gone to that more Star Wars-y flight simulator type, but it's showing what we've all been imagining. And so for people who've been watching this series for a long time, it's really nice to kind of see these ships actually doing what have been described more than shown, if that makes any sense. It's got a different vibe, the series, and I'm digging it. It's different, and it's different because they're at war. They're at war with the Klingons, so, you know, you're dealing with factors that you don't normally deal with in peacetime, like most Star Trek series are. You know, you deal with some warfare in Deep Space Nine, in which it gets a little nitty-gritty, and they deal with some of that. But there are things that we've dealt with in our time, in our world, that are relevant in a wartime atmosphere for Star Trek Discovery. So it's pretty cool. It's a different vibe, a different feel, but relevant. All within staying in the vision of Gene Roddenberry. Okay, you know, they want to be explorers again, but they've got to get through this war. You know, it is that future where people are working together better, but there's still some issues that they're having to confront and deal with, and they're dealing with it from their perspective of that time. For example, you know, Michael Burnham, you know, a good chunk of the Federation believes she's the reason for this war. And So she's dealing with that stigma. And we're all human beings. These things are still going to happen. But now you're seeing it from a future perspective of how they deal with these type of things and manage it to maintain this atmosphere of cooperation and respect that we're all yearning to get out in the stars and be united as a people, and how we manage these issues that we deal with and struggle with in our time, but they're able to deal with in a different way in that time. So overall feelings for Star Trek Discovery, I think it's a great series. I'm really enjoying it. Yes, it has some of its issues, and yes, there's some drama coming with it that people are creating to cause a stir. But overall, I really enjoy the series. I think Star Trek fans, if they can set aside their preconceptions and, understand that this is just different, will really enjoy it as well. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I know it's not Disney. We will get back to Disney. I'm going to try to... Originally this week, I was going to do my birthday haul, because I got a lot of Disney stuff for my birthday. I'm going to try to do that for next week. I've also got an episode where we're going to be trying a bunch of the unique Oreo flavors. Again, not another Disney episode, but it should be a fun episode, because I think we've got like 4 different flavors that we're going to try. Because Oreo's just going crazy with their flavors lately. So I'm not sure if that's going to be next week or the Disney haul. Whichever one comes first, the other one's coming right after. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm going to leave you as I leave you every week. I hope you never lose sight of one thing. This was all started by a mouse. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.